The laughter echoed through our dining room as Marcus raised his wine glass, the expensive Bordeaux catching the light from our crystal chandelier. His friends from Fletcher Associates nodded appreciatively as he launched into another story about his career achievements, their designer suits and confident smirks a familiar sight at our monthly dinner parties. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. And that's when I closed the Henderson deal, Marcus continued, loosening his Italian silk tie with the practiced ease of a man who'd never doubted his place in the world. 18 months of negotiations, but we finally got them to sign. The partners were so impressed they're talking about making me senior associate by Christmas. I stood quietly by the kitchen doorway, refilling water glasses and removing empty plates, invisible in the way that service staff always are. After 12 years of marriage, I'd grown accustomed to playing this role during Marcus's professional gatherings. The dutiful wife, supportive but unobtrusive, content to let her successful husband shine. "What about Emma?" asked David Chen, one of Marcus's closest friends from law school. "Still working at that little cleaning company?" The pause that followed was pregnant with meaning. I felt 5 pairs of eyes turned toward me, though their expressions ranged from polite curiosity to barely concealed amusement. Marcus's face shifted almost imperceptibly, that subtle tightening around his eyes that I'd learned to recognize as embarrassment. "Emma's still with Sunshine Solutions," Marcus replied, his tone carefully neutral. "It's steady work, cleaning offices?" This from Rebecca Walsh, the only woman among Marcus's colleagues, her voice carrying just enough sympathy to make it sting. "How admirable! Not everyone can handle that kind of practical work." I set down the pitcher of water with deliberate care, forcing my expression to remain pleasant. "It pays the bills," I said quietly, offering them the response they expected from Marcus's underachieving wife. What they didn't know, what Marcus didn't know, was that those bills included the mortgage on this 4-bedroom colonial in Westchester, the lease payments on his BMW, and the monthly fees for the country club where he played golf with potential clients. But I'd learned years ago that sometimes the most powerful position is the one no one suspects you hold. "Emma's being modest," Marcus said, though his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "She's actually— What's your official title again, honey?" The question was meant to be supportive, but I could hear the underlying note of condescension. After all these years, he still didn't really know what I did for work. In his mind, I was simply the woman who left early each morning in worn jeans and returned home smelling faintly of cleaning supplies, contributing just enough to our household to justify my existence. "Senior Operations Coordinator," I replied, sticking to the job description I'd crafted years ago when our relationship was new and full of promise. "Right," Marcus nodded, already turning back to his friends. "Very operational." The laughter that followed wasn't malicious exactly. It was the kind of polite amusement that successful people share when confronted with lives smaller than their own. I'd heard it before, would hear it again, and each time it strengthened my resolve to maintain the carefully constructed fiction that protected us both. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. David raised his glass. "Here's to Marcus, future senior associate, and Emma, keeper of the cleanest offices in the city." They toasted, and I smiled, excusing myself to clear the dessert plates. In the kitchen, I allowed myself a moment of genuine amusement as I thought about what David had just said. He was more right than he knew. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant, Linda. "Monthly reports are ready for review. The Fletcher Associates property showing excellent numbers this quarter. Shall I schedule your site visit for tomorrow?" I glanced toward the dining room, where Marcus was regaling his friends with another story about his professional prowess. Fletcher Associates, where he worked 60-hour weeks in pursuit of partnership, where he spent his days in conference rooms that I had personally approved during the building's renovation 5 years ago. Schedule it for 2 p.m., I typed back. Use the service elevator. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Marcus climbed the corporate ladder at one of the city's most prestigious law firms, I owned the building beneath his feet. Literally. The 40-story glass and steel tower where Fletcher and I, Associates leased their prestigious corner offices on floors 30 through 34, was just one small part of my portfolio. Sunshine Solutions had started as exactly what Marcus thought it was. A small cleaning company I'd inherited from my grandmother. But what he'd never bothered to investigate was how I'd transformed that modest business into something much larger. While he was in law school, drowning in student loans and dreams of legal glory, I was quietly building an empire. The guests began filtering into the living room for after-dinner drinks, and I rejoined them with coffee service. The conversation had shifted to office politics and partnership tracks, the kind of inside baseball that lawyers love to discuss. I listened with the appropriate level of wifely interest, nodding at the right moments and asking harmless questions that made Marcus look knowledgeable when he answered them. The new building management is actually pretty impressive, Rebecca was saying. They upgraded all the conference room technology last month. Very responsive to tenant needs. Must be nice having competent building management, David agreed. Our old place was a nightmare. Broken elevators, temperature control issues, the works. Marcus leaned forward. The thing about Fletcher's building is that it's clearly owned by someone who understands business. Everything runs smoothly, maintenance is top-notch, and the security is excellent. Whoever owns it knows how to maintain a property. I sipped my coffee, hiding my smile behind the rim of my cup. Do you know who owns it? I asked innocently. Some investment company, I think, Marcus replied with a shrug. Corporate ownership, probably. Though honestly, I've never really looked into it. Does it matter? I suppose not, I agreed, setting down my cup. The evening wound down with the usual promises to get together soon and speculation about year-end bonuses. As I showed the guests to the door, accepting their compliments on dinner and their gentle condescension about my work, I felt the familiar satisfaction of a performance well executed. After the last guest departed, Marcus and I cleaned up together in comfortable silence. It was one of our few remaining rituals from the early days of our marriage, when money was tight and we couldn't afford a housekeeper. Now we could afford anything we wanted, though Marcus had no idea why. Nice evening, he said, loading wine glasses into the dishwasher. I think Rebecca was impressed with your questions about the partnership process. Very supportive wife stuff. I try, I replied, wiping down the counter with practiced efficiency. Marcus paused, studying me with the analytical expression he usually reserved for legal briefs. Emma, can I ask you something? My hand stilled on the granite surface. Of course. Are you happy? I mean, really happy? With your work, with all of this? The question caught me off guard. In 12 years of marriage, Marcus had rarely shown curiosity about my inner life. Our relationship had settled into comfortable parallel tracks, his ambitions and my support, his achievements and my admiration, his dreams and my facilitation. I'm content, I said carefully. Why do you ask? I don't know. Sometimes I worry that you're settling. That maybe you could do more with your life than cleaning offices. He turned to face me fully, his expression unusually serious. You're smart, Emma, smarter than you give yourself credit for. If you wanted to go back to school, get some kind of degree, I could support us both for a while. The offer was well-intentioned, even generous. It was also completely unnecessary and faintly insulting, though I knew he meant it kindly. Marcus genuinely believed he was married to an underachiever who needed his encouragement to reach her potential. "That's very sweet," I replied, moving to put away the last of the dishes. "But I like what I do. It's more complex than people realize." "I'm sure it is," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I just want you to know that you have options. If you ever want to aim higher, higher. As if owning a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio wasn't high enough. As if running a company with over 200 employees across 3 states was somehow less ambitious than chasing partnership at a law firm. "I'll keep that in mind," I said, kissing his cheek. "I'm going to get ready for bed. Big day tomorrow. More offices to conquer?" he asked with a gentle smile. Something like that. Upstairs in our bedroom, I sat at my vanity and removed my jewelry piece by piece. The diamond earrings Marcus had given me for our 10th anniversary. The tennis bracelet from last Christmas. The wedding ring that had cost him 3 months' salary back when he was a struggling associate. All beautiful. All meaningful. All paid for with money I'd generated while he thought I was scrubbing toilets for minimum wage. My reflection looked back at me from the mirror, a woman approaching 40 with laugh lines around her eyes and hands that showed the wear of actual work, even if that work wasn't what people assumed. I looked tired, I realized. Not physically tired, but emotionally weary from maintaining a fiction that had grown increasingly burdensome over the years. When had this started? When had I decided that it was easier to let Marcus believe his version of our life rather than correct his assumptions? In the beginning, I'd told myself I was protecting him. His ego, his sense of masculine provider role, his need to feel successful and important. But somewhere along the way, protection had become deception, and deception had become habit. My phone lit up with an email from my property management company. The quarterly financial reports were ready for review, showing healthy profits across all holdings. The Fletcher Associates property alone generated enough monthly income to cover our entire household budget twice over. I opened my laptop and logged into my private investment account, reviewing the portfolio that Marcus had never seen and never asked about. Technology stocks, municipal bonds, real estate investment trusts, and of course, the crown jewel, Turner Holdings, the shell company through which I owned 17 commercial properties in Manhattan, Brooklyn and Queens Turner Holdings, named after my grandmother, Helen Turner, who'd built Sunshine Solutions from nothing, and taught me that success was often measured not by recognition, but by results. She died when I was 25, leaving me a small cleaning company and a piece of advice that had shaped my entire approach to business. The person who controls the real estate controls everything else. I'd taken that advice to heart, using the cleaning business as a way to identify undervalued properties and motivated sellers. Who paid attention to the cleaning lady? Who noticed when she overheard conversations about financial difficulties, impending divorces, or business failures? I'd learned more about real estate opportunities while emptying trash cans than Marcus had learned in all his years of corporate law. The first property purchase had been almost accidental. A small office building in Queens, owned by a client who was facing bankruptcy. I'd offered to buy it for cash, using money I'd saved by living far below my means while Marcus was in law school. He'd assumed my frugality was necessity. In reality, it was strategy. From there, it had been a careful process of reinvestment and growth. Each property generated income that I used to purchase the next one. Each acquisition taught me something new about market dynamics, tenant management, and urban development patterns. By the time Marcus graduated law school and landed his first job, I owned 3 buildings and was already scouting for a 4th. The Fletcher Associates building had been my biggest gamble. A prestigious address, prime location, but asking price that would stretch my resources thin. I'd spent months analyzing the tenant roster, studying the lease agreements, projecting revenue streams. When I finally made the offer, it was the culmination of 8 years of careful planning and calculated risk-taking. The closing had taken place on a Tuesday afternoon in March, 3 years into Marcus's employment at Fletcher Associates. I'd signed the papers in a law office 6 blocks from where my husband was reviewing contracts for corporate clients, neither of us aware of the cosmic joke being played out across the city. That night, Marcus had come home excited about a new case he'd been assigned. Something involving commercial real estate litigation, he'd explained over dinner. I'd listened and asked appropriate questions while internally marveling at the irony. Now, 3 years later, Marcus worked in a building I owned, paying rent to a company I controlled, while complaining to his friends about his wife's lack of ambition. The situation had evolved from amusing to absurd to something approaching tragic. I closed the laptop and prepared for bed, my mind already turning to tomorrow's schedule. Linda had arranged for a comprehensive property inspection, something I tried to do quarterly for each building in my portfolio. Tomorrow I would walk through the Fletcher Associates offices, not as Marcus's underachieving wife, but as their landlord. The building management company would introduce me as a representative from Turner Holdings, reviewing the property for potential improvements and tenant satisfaction issues. I would wear a business suit instead of cleaning clothes, carry a briefcase instead of a mop bucket, and ask questions about lease renewals and space utilization. Marcus would never know I'd been there. The thought should have satisfied me, but instead it left me feeling hollow. Somewhere in the space between protection and deception, I'd lost the ability to share my successes with the person who should have been celebrating them with me. My achievements existed in a parallel universe that Marcus could never access, not because he wasn't invited, but because I'd decided he couldn't handle the invitation. The bedroom was dark when Marcus finally came upstairs, his movement careful to avoid waking me. I lay still, listening to his nighttime routine. The soft sound of clothes being hung in the closet, the running water in the bathroom, the careful slide of the mattress as he settled into bed. "Emma?" he whispered. "You awake? I've been thinking about what I said earlier, about you aiming higher." He shifted, and I could feel him turning toward me in the darkness. "I hope you know I think you're amazing. Exactly as you are. I just want to make sure you're not limiting yourself because of us, because of me." The confession hung in the air between us, vulnerable and honest in a way that Marcus rarely allowed himself to be. For a moment, I considered telling him everything. The properties, the investments, the careful construction of Turner Holdings and the empire built from a cleaning bucket and a sharp eye for opportunity. But the moment passed, and I reached for his hand instead. "I love you too," I whispered back. It was true, even if it wasn't complete. I did love Marcus, the earnest young man who'd courted me with poetry and promises, who'd worked 80-hour weeks to build a career that would support our future together. I loved him enough to let him believe he was the provider, the success story, the one with the important job and the bright future. But love, I was beginning to understand, could become a prison just as easily as freedom could become a burden. And somewhere in the space between protecting Marcus's ego and building my own empire, I'd trapped us both in a story that served neither of us well. Tomorrow I would walk through my building, reviewing tenant satisfaction and lease agreements. I would nod politely as the building manager explained their challenges and opportunities. I would make notes about improvements and expansions, decisions that would affect hundreds of employees, including my own husband. And then I would come home, change into my cleaning clothes, and listen to Marcus complain about his demanding job in a building I owned. The alarm would ring at 6 a.m., as it had every morning for the past 12 years. I would make coffee, read the financial news, and review my schedule while Marcus slept in, preparing for another day of pursuing partnership at Fletcher Associates. But as I drifted toward sleep, I found myself wondering how much longer I could maintain this elaborate fiction. How many more dinner parties could I endure, listening to polite condescension about my dead-end job? How many more years could I pretend that Marcus was the success story while I played the role of supportive wife? The building inspection tomorrow would be routine, professional, unremarkable. Marcus would never know I'd been there, just as he'd never known about any of my other achievements. The secret would remain safe, the fiction intact, the carefully constructed story of our marriage undisturbed. But deep in the darkness of our shared bedroom, I found myself imagining a different kind of tomorrow. One where Marcus came home from his important job and found me at my computer, reviewing quarterly profits instead of coupon circulars. Where I could tell him about the challenges of property management instead of inventing stories about difficult cleaning clients. Where I could finally stop, pretending to be smaller than I was. The thought both thrilled and terrified me, and I fell asleep to the sound of Marcus's steady breathing and the distant hum of possibilities I wasn't quite brave enough to explore. The morning arrived with the crisp efficiency I'd trained myself to expect. 6 a.m. sharp, I was dressed in my usual work attire. Dark jeans, comfortable sneakers, and a navy polo shirt with the Sunshine Solutions logo embroidered on the chest. The uniform Marcus had grown so accustomed to that he barely glanced up from his phone as I kissed him goodbye. "Early meeting today?" he asked absently, scrolling through legal news. "Property inspection," I replied truthfully. "Might run late?" I'll probably be stuck at the office until 9 anyway. The Henderson contract needs final review before tomorrow's signing." I paused at the kitchen doorway. "The Henderson contract?" "Commercial lease agreement. 40-story building in Midtown. Boring stuff, really, but the client's paying premium rates for our attention to detail." Marcus finally looked up, offering me the distracted smile of a man already mentally at work. "You wouldn't find it interesting, my building." Marcus was reviewing lease agreements for my building, billing hours to tenants who paid rent to my company. The irony was so perfect it almost seemed scripted. "I'm sure you'll do great work," I said, meaning every word in ways he couldn't imagine. The drive into Manhattan gave me time to shift mental gears. By the time I parked in the underground garage of 425 Park Avenue, my building, though the deed listed Turner Holdings as owner, I had transformed from Marcus's underachieving wife into one of the city's most successful commercial property owners. Linda Martinez met me at the service elevator, her professional efficiency a stark contrast to the casual persona I maintained at home. At 32, Linda had been my assistant for 6 years, recruited from a property management firm after I'd observed her handling a difficult tenant dispute with remarkable skill. "Good morning, Ms. Turner," she greeted me, using the surname I'd legally maintained for business purposes while taking Marcus's name socially. "The inspection schedule is loaded on your tablet. Building manager James Rodriguez is waiting on 37. I accepted the tablet and the visitor's badge identifying me as E. Turner, Turner Holdings representative. The transformation was complete. Navy business suit, leather briefcase, confident stride. The woman who would spend this morning reviewing tenant? Satisfaction bore no resemblance to the one who'd served coffee to condescending lawyers 12 hours earlier. "Any issues I should know about before we start?" I asked as we rode the elevator upward. Fletcher Associates mentioned some concerns about conference room acoustics on 32. "Nothing major, but they're requesting sound dampening improvements for client meetings," Linda checked her notes. Otherwise, tenant satisfaction scores are excellent. Lease renewals are tracking at 96%. Fletcher Associates. Marcus's floor. I tried to calculate the odds that I would encounter him during the inspection, but Linda had scheduled our visit carefully. Marcus rarely left the 34th floor where senior associates had their offices, and he would be buried in contract review all morning. The elevator opened onto the 37th floor, revealing James Rodriguez waiting with the patient expression of a man accustomed to accommodating building owners. At 55, James had managed commercial properties for 2 decades before I'd recruited him 3 years ago. He understood that Turner Holdings valued discretion above all else. "Ms. Turner," he greeted me with a firm handshake. "Ready for the grand tour?" What followed was a masterclass in property management. We moved systematically through each floor, reviewing everything from HVAC efficiency to security protocols. James had prepared comprehensive reports on tenant satisfaction, maintenance schedules, and capital improvement recommendations. The building hummed with quiet prosperity. Law firms, consulting companies, financial services, the kind of tenants who paid premium rents for prestigious addresses and reliable infrastructure. I'd chosen well when I'd purchased this property, though the decision had required leveraging everything I owned at the time. "Tenant retention is exceptional," James reported as we reviewed occupancy charts in his 38th floor office. "The Fletcher Associates lease renewal is particularly significant. 5-year extension with a 15% rate increase. They were eager to stay." I studied the numbers with genuine satisfaction. Fletcher Associates represented nearly 30% of the building's rental income. Marcus's employer was essentially funding our lifestyle, though he would never know it. "What about their specific concerns?" I asked, remembering Linda's mention of acoustics issues. "Conference room modifications on 32. Apparently they're handling more sensitive client meetings and want enhanced sound isolation. The work would cost about $40,000, but they're willing to cover half if we handle the installation." I made a note on my tablet. Marcus had mentioned increased client confidentiality requirements recently, complaining about having to drive across town for secure meeting spaces. This improvement would make his work life easier while increasing the property's value. "Approve it," I decided. "Schedule the work for after hours to minimize tenant disruption." James nodded, making his own notes. "I'll coordinate with their office manager. They've been very communicative about their needs." We continued the inspection, working our way down floor by floor. Each level revealed the quiet efficiency of a well-managed property. Clean common areas, functioning elevators, satisfied tenants conducting the business that kept New York's economy humming. On the 34th floor, I paused outside the Fletcher Associates reception area. Through the glass walls, I could see the familiar layout of Marcus's workplace. Open cubicles for junior associates, private offices along the windows for senior staff, conference rooms equipped with the latest technology I'd approved in previous budget cycles. "Everything looks excellent," I told James. "The building's reputation for reliability is clearly deserved." "We've worked hard to maintain standards," he replied, pride evident in his voice. "Turner Holdings has given us the resources to do things right." As we waited for the elevator, I caught a glimpse of someone familiar walking past the reception area. David Chen, Marcus's friend from last night's dinner party, carrying what looked like case files and wearing the focused expression of a lawyer preparing for important meetings. David, who had toasted Marcus's success while gently mocking his wife's humble career. David, who worked in a building I owned while assuming I spent my days scrubbing floors for minimum wage. The elevator arrived, and we descended toward the lower floors where the final phase of inspection waited. But my mind remained fixed on that brief glimpse of David, and the complex web of assumptions and realities that defined my daily existence. The building's financial performance exceeded projections this quarter, Linda reported as we reviewed final numbers in James's office. Net operating income is up 12% year over year. I studied the spreadsheets with the satisfaction of someone who understood that real wealth came from owning assets, not just earning salaries. Marcus made excellent money as a senior associate, but his income was linear, tied directly to the hours he billed and the cases he won. My income was exponential, growing through appreciation, improved efficiency, and strategic reinvestment. What about expansion opportunities? I asked, already knowing the answer but wanting to hear James's assessment. The building next door is coming on the market. Owner is facing a divorce and needs liquidity quickly. James pulled up satellite imagery on his computer. It would be a natural addition to our portfolio. Similar tenant profile, shared parking garage, potential for connected infrastructure. I'd been tracking that property for months, waiting for the right moment to make an offer. The owner's personal difficulties created an opportunity for below-market acquisition, but timing would be crucial. Send me the preliminary financials, I instructed, and schedule a discreet inspection for next week. As we concluded the meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Lunch meeting ran long. Won't be home until late. Don't wait up. Love you, I smiled, imagining him 12 floors below, reviewing contracts for the building we were sitting in while texting his wife, who he assumed was somewhere across town mopping office floors. Anything else you need today, Miss Turner? James asked, gathering his reports. Just one thing, I said, making a decision that surprised even me. I'd like to tour the 32nd floor conference rooms. The ones Fletcher Associates mentioned for acoustic improvements. Linda checked her tablet. That floor is currently occupied. We could schedule for after hours. Actually, I said slowly, let's do it now. I want to assess the acoustics during active business hours. The decision felt reckless and necessary in equal measure. After 12 years of maintaining careful separation between my two lives, I was about to walk through the offices where Marcus worked, carrying a briefcase and wearing the authority of ownership. James led us back to the elevator, his expression professionally neutral, though I suspected he sensed something unusual about the request. The 32nd floor housed Fletcher Associates, junior associates, and paralegal staff, along with the conference rooms used for client meetings. As we stepped off the elevator, I felt the familiar thrill of entering territory that existed at the intersection of my two identities. The receptionist glanced up from her desk, offering the polite smile reserved for building management. Good afternoon, James said smoothly. This is Ms. Turner from Turner Holdings. We're conducting a routine inspection of the conference facilities. Of course, the receptionist replied. Let me know if you need anything. We moved through the floor with quiet efficiency, James pointing out traffic patterns and acoustic considerations while I took notes with the focused attention of someone who understood that every detail mattered. The conference rooms were impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows, state-of-the-art audio-visual equipment, and the kind of prestigious atmosphere that made clients feel confident about paying premium legal fees. The sound isolation issue is most pronounced in Conference Room C, James explained, leading us toward the corner space, adjacent to the associate's bullpen, so normal office conversation sometimes carries through. I could hear what he meant immediately. The low hum of professional activity was audible through the walls. Phone conversations, keyboard clicking, the occasional laugh or discussion. For confidential client meetings, the ambient noise would be genuinely problematic. The acoustic engineering firm recommended double-wall construction with specialized insulation, James continued. It would eliminate the sound transfer completely. As he spoke, I heard a familiar voice from the bullpen area. Marcus, discussing something with a colleague in the animated tone he used when he was excited about a case. My husband was perhaps 30 feet away, separated by a wall and a lifetime of assumptions about who I was and what I did. Ms. Turner? Linda's voice seemed to come from far away. Did you want to review the proposed construction timeline? I realized I'd been standing motionless, listening to Marcus's voice like a woman overhearing a conversation in a foreign language that she almost but not quite understood. Yes, I said, forcing my attention back to the matter at hand. Let's review everything. The remaining inspection passed in a blur of technical specifications and budget projections. I approved the acoustic improvements, authorized routine maintenance upgrades, and scheduled follow-up meetings with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to compartmentalize competing realities. But as we prepared to leave, James mentioned something that stopped me cold. Oh, one more thing, he said, checking his notes. Fletcher Associates requested access to the 39th floor storage area. They need additional space for document retention. The partner who made the request mentioned his wife had experience with commercial space management and thought it might be cost-effective. My blood went cold. Which partner? Actually, it was a senior associate, Marcus Morrison. He said his wife worked in facilities management and had suggested they could save money by handling their own storage organization rather than paying for professional services. The careful edifice I'd built around my dual identity suddenly felt as fragile as tissue paper. Marcus had volunteered my supposed expertise to solve his firm's space problems, never imagining that his building owner was listening to every word. I see, I managed, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. And what did you tell him? That all space allocation requests needed to go through building management, James replied. Standard protocol. But I said we'd consider it if they submitted a formal proposal. I nodded, trying to process the implications. Marcus thought he was helping his career by leveraging his wife's humble facilities management experience. In reality, he was asking me to approve his request while having no idea who he was actually asking. Handle it through normal channels, I instructed, but make sure any proposal includes detailed specifications and insurance liability coverage. As we walked back toward the elevator, I felt the weight of 12 years of carefully maintained deception pressing against my chest. The web of assumptions and half-truths that had protected us both was becoming increasingly complex, and I wasn't sure how much longer it could hold. In the elevator, Linda checked her tablet one final time. Your 4 p.m. meeting with the accountants is confirmed. The quarterly tax filings need review before submission. I nodded absently, my mind still processing the morning's revelations. Marcus was literally asking his wife's landlord for favors, while assuming his wife was too small and unimportant to matter in his professional world. The car ride home gave me time to decompress and shift back into the role Marcus expected to find when he returned from his important lawyer job. By the time I walked through our front door, I was once again the woman who spent her days cleaning other people's offices and dreaming of bigger things. But something had changed during those hours in my own building. Walking through Marcus's workplace with the authority of ownership, the careful balance I'd maintained between protection and deception was becoming untenable, and I wasn't sure which version of myself could survive what came next. I changed into comfortable clothes and began preparing dinner. The domestic routine familiar and grounding after a morning spent navigating the complex intersection of my two identities. But as I worked, I found myself imagining a different kind of homecoming, one where Marcus arrived to find me reviewing architectural plans instead of chopping vegetables, where I could tell him about the morning's successful inspection instead of inventing stories about difficult clients, where the woman he married could finally be the same woman who owned the building where he worked. The thought both thrilled and terrified me, and I wasn't sure I was brave enough to explore what it might mean for our carefully constructed life together. 3 weeks after the building inspection, the careful balance I'd maintained for 12 years began to unravel in ways I hadn't anticipated. It started with a phone call that Marcus took in our kitchen while I was preparing breakfast, his voice carrying the excited energy he reserved for career breakthroughs. "That's incredible news," he said, pacing by the window with his coffee cup. "When would you need the proposal?" I buttered toast and tried not to listen, but Marcus's side of professional conversations had become background noise to our morning routine. Until he said something that made my hand freeze on the butter knife. "Emma actually has experience with commercial space planning. I know it sounds unlikely, but she's worked in facilities management for years. She might have some insights about cost-effective storage solutions." My throat went dry. Marcus was discussing the storage space request with someone from Fletcher Associates, volunteering my expertise without understanding that he was essentially asking me to consult on my own property. "Let me talk to her tonight," Marcus continued. "If she's interested, maybe she could take a look at the space requirements and put together some preliminary recommendations." The call ended, and Marcus turned to me with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Emma, I might have an opportunity for you." "Oh?" I managed, setting down my toast. "You know how you're always saying your facilities management experience could translate to bigger projects?" Marcus pulled out a chair, his enthusiasm infectious. "Well, Fletcher needs help organizing their document storage. It's not glamorous work, but it would be consulting rather than cleaning. Better money, more professional environment." The irony was so complete it took my breath away. Marcus was offering me a consulting opportunity with tenants in my own building, presenting it as a step up from my supposedly menial job. "What kind of consulting?" I asked carefully. "Space optimization, organizational systems, that sort of thing. The kind of thing you do every day, just on a larger scale." Marcus reached across the table, taking my hand. "I know you've been content with your current work, but this could be a real chance to show what you're capable of." I studied his face, seeing genuine excitement mixed with something that might have been pride. For the first time in years, Marcus was seeing an opportunity to publicly acknowledge his wife's professional abilities, even if he fundamentally misunderstood what those abilities were. "I'd need to see the space first," I said slowly. "Understand their specific needs." "Of course. I can arrange a tour this week." Marcus squeezed my hand. "Emma, this could be the beginning of something bigger for you. Real consulting work, professional references, maybe even other clients." As he left for work that morning, Marcus kissed me with the enthusiasm of someone who believed he was helping to launch his wife's career. The reality was far more complex. He was unknowingly arranging for me to consult on improvements to my own property, while maintaining the fiction that I was climbing up from cleaning floors. I spent the morning reviewing the Fletcher and Associates file, studying their lease terms and space utilization patterns with new attention to detail. Linda had prepared comprehensive reports on their expansion requests, but now I needed to approach the situation from an entirely different angle. "This is getting complicated," Linda observed when I called to discuss the situation. "How do you want to handle the consulting request?" "Carefully," I replied, staring out the window of my home office. "Marcus thinks he's helping me transition from cleaning to consulting. If I refuse, I'll have to explain why I'm not interested in advancing my career. And if you accept, I'll be consulting on improvements to my own building while pretending to be discovering it for the first time." The situation required delicate navigation. Too much expertise would raise questions about how a cleaning company coordinator knew so much about commercial real estate. Too little would disappoint Marcus and potentially damage Fletcher and Associates' perception of my abilities. 2 days later, I found myself standing in the lobby of 425 Park Avenue wearing business casual attire that split the difference between my cleaning uniform and my property owner persona. Marcus had arranged to meet me during his lunch break, his pride evident as he guided me through the building he thought I was seeing for the first time. "Impressive, isn't it?" he said as we rode the elevator to the 32nd floor. "This is exactly the kind of professional environment where your skills could really shine." I nodded appreciatively, playing the role of someone experiencing her first glimpse of corporate Manhattan real estate. "The building seems very well maintained." "Oh, it is. The management company is top-notch. Everything runs like clockwork." Marcus straightened his tie, the gesture unconsciously territorial. "Wait until you see the office space. It's the kind of place where serious business gets done." The Fletcher Associates reception area looked different through the lens of this new charade. I'd seen it 3 weeks earlier as a property owner reviewing tenant satisfaction. Now I was experiencing it as Marcus's wife being introduced to his professional world. "Emma Morrison," Marcus announced to the receptionist. "She's here to consult on our storage optimization project." The receptionist smiled politely, handing me a visitor's badge with my married name. For a moment, I held 2 identities in my hands. The visitor's badge identifying me as Emma Morrison, consultant, and the memory of the Turner Holdings badge I'd worn during my inspection. Marcus's office was on the 34th floor, a corner space with windows overlooking the city. I'd approved the lease modifications that had made his promotion possible, but seeing the space through his eyes gave me a different perspective on his achievement. "Nice view," I commented, genuinely impressed by how the afternoon light played across his desk. "One of the perks of making senior associate," Marcus replied with satisfaction. "Though honestly, the real victory is getting to work in a building like this. The prestige matters in this business." He was proud of his workplace in a way that was both touching and absurd. Marcus had achieved genuine success within the legal profession, but his greatest professional pride centered on working in a building owned by his supposedly underachieving wife. "So tell me about this storage project," I said. Settling into the chair across from his desk, Marcus pulled out a folder thick with documents. "We're expanding our document retention capabilities. The firm handles a lot of sensitive contracts now, and we need secure, organized storage that meets legal compliance standards." As he outlined the requirements, I recognized the specifications I'd reviewed during my property inspection. But hearing Marcus explain them gave me insight into the operational challenges Fletcher Associates faced, the practical considerations behind the formal requests I'd approved as building owner. "The space we're looking at is on the 39th floor," Marcus continued. "Raw storage area that could be converted to meet our needs. The question is how to optimize the layout for both security and efficiency." I made notes with the careful attention of someone who genuinely wanted to help, even as I calculated the costs and logistics based on information Marcus couldn't access. The storage conversion would require electrical upgrades, enhanced climate control, and security modifications, improvements that would benefit the building's overall value while solving Fletcher's immediate needs. "I'd need to see the space," I said. Knowing the tour would be another exercise in elaborate deception. "Already arranged," Marcus replied, checking his watch. "James Rodriguez from Building Management is meeting us in 10 minutes. My stomach clenched. James Rodriguez, who knew me as Ms. Turner from Turner Holdings, was about to guide me through a property inspection while I pretended to be discovering the space for the first time. The elevator ride to the 39th floor felt interminable. Marcus chatted about office politics and client relationships while I mentally prepared for one of the most challenging performances of my life. James was waiting by the elevator when the doors opened, his professional smile faltering almost imperceptibly when he saw me. To his credit, he recovered quickly, extending his hand with practiced courtesy. "Ms. Morrison," he said smoothly. "Marcus tells me you're consulting on space optimization." "That's right," I replied, shaking his hand while maintaining eye contact. "I understand you have some raw storage area that might meet our needs." If James recognized me from 3 weeks earlier, he gave no sign. His professionalism was absolute as he led us through the conversion of E. Turner, property owner, into Emma Morrison, consultant, without missing a beat. The 39th floor storage area was exactly as I remembered. Raw concrete space with basic lighting and minimal climate control. But seeing it through Marcus's eyes, I understood why he was excited about the potential. "As you can see, it's essentially a blank canvas," James explained, his tone carefully neutral. "The question is how to transform it into functional document storage that meets legal industry standards." I walked through the space with deliberate consideration, measuring distances and taking notes while Marcus and James watched my assessment. Every suggestion I made had to balance genuine expertise with plausible limitations, demonstrating knowledge without revealing the depth of my understanding. "The humidity control will be crucial," I observed, running my hand along the concrete wall. "Legal documents require specific environmental conditions for long-term preservation." Marcus nodded appreciatively. "See? I told you she knew this stuff." James made his own notes, his expression professionally interested, though I suspected he was processing the complex dynamics at play. "What about security considerations?" "Controlled access, obviously. Motion sensors. Maybe some kind of audit trail for document retrieval." I paused thoughtfully, though you'd need to coordinate with building management on any significant electrical upgrades. "That shouldn't be a problem," James replied carefully. "Turner Holdings has been very responsive to tenant improvement requests." The mention of my business identity and my married name felt like a moment of vertigo. I was Emma Morrison discussing improvements with building management, while James Rodriguez carefully avoided acknowledging that Emma Morrison and E. Turner were the same person. "Turner Holdings?" I asked, playing my role. "They're the building owners?" "Property management company," James corrected smoothly. "They represent the ownership group. Very professional operation." Marcus stepped closer, his hand finding the small of my back in a gesture both protective and proprietary. "Emma doesn't usually work in buildings this upscale. This is a real opportunity for her to see how professional property management operates." The comment stung more than Marcus intended. His pride in showing me his world was genuine, but it was built on assumptions about my limitations that had grown increasingly painful to maintain. "It's certainly impressive," I agreed, making a final note about lighting requirements. The tour concluded with handshakes and promises to submit a formal proposal within the week. As James walked away, I felt the weight of the performance I'd just delivered, the careful balance between expertise and deception that had defined the last hour. "That went well," Marcus said as we waited for the elevator. "I think you impressed him." "He seemed knowledgeable about building systems," I replied truthfully. "The whole operation runs smoothly. Whoever Turner Holdings is, they clearly know what they're doing." Marcus pressed the elevator button, his satisfaction evident. "It's the kind of professional environment where you could really build a consulting practice." As we descended toward the lobby, I found myself trapped between competing emotions. Marcus's faith in my abilities was touching, but his assumptions about my limitations were becoming unbearable. The elaborate fiction I'd constructed to protect his ego was now preventing him from seeing who I actually was. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table preparing the storage optimization proposal that Fletcher Associates had requested. The recommendations I was drafting would essentially be consulting advice from a building owner to her own tenants, a level of complexity that felt both absurd and exhausting. Marcus reviewed the proposal over my shoulder, his excitement palpable as he read through my suggestions. "This is really good work, Emma. Professional level stuff." "Thank you," I said, though the praise felt hollow. "I think this could be the beginning of something big for you. Real consulting work, meaningful projects, the kind of career you deserve." I looked up at him, seeing genuine affection and support in his expression. Marcus loved me and wanted me to succeed, but his definition of success was so fundamentally limited by his assumptions about who I was that his encouragement felt more like condescension. "What if I'm already successful?" I asked quietly. "What if my current work is more complex than it appears?" Marcus paused, considering the question with the careful attention he brought to legal briefs. "I suppose success means different things to different people. But don't you want more? Don't you want to be recognized for your abilities?" The question cut deeper than he intended. Recognition was exactly what I wanted, but not in the way Marcus imagined. I didn't need to climb up from cleaning floors to prove my worth. I needed him to understand that the woman he'd married was already running an empire. "Sometimes," I said carefully, "people are more successful than they appear to be." Marcus smiled, the expression both loving and patronizing. "Of course. And this consulting project is your chance to show the world what I've always known, that you're capable of much more than you've been doing." As he spoke, I realized that the careful fiction I'd maintained to protect Marcus's ego had become a prison for both of us. He couldn't see my actual achievements, and I couldn't share my real successes. The very love that had inspired my deception was being poisoned by the distance it created between us. The storage proposal was submitted the next morning, launching a process that would require weeks of coordination between Emma Morrison, consultant, and Turner Holdings property owner. Linda would handle the official approvals while I managed the client relationship. Another elaborate dance of identity management that was becoming increasingly exhausting to maintain. But as I prepared for another day of maintaining careful boundaries between my two lives, I found myself wondering how much longer this charade could continue. The web of deception was growing more complex with each passing day, and sooner or later, something would have to give. The question was whether our marriage was strong enough to survive the truth I'd been hiding for 12 years. The moment of truth arrived on a Tuesday morning in November, 6 weeks after I'd submitted my storage optimization proposal to Fletcher Associates. I was reviewing quarterly financial reports in my home office when Marcus burst through the door. His face flushed with excitement and something that looked like panic. "Emma, we have a problem," he announced, clutching a folder against his chest. I looked up from my computer screen, where Turner Holdings' third-quarter profits were displayed in neat columns. "What kind of problem?" "The good kind." "Maybe. I don't know." Marcus collapsed into the chair across from my desk, his usual composure completely absent. "They loved your storage proposal. Not just liked it, loved it. The partners want to meet with you directly." My mouth went dry. "Meet with me?" "This afternoon, 2 o'clock. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes bright with possibility and fear. "Emma, they're talking about offering you a long-term consulting contract. Not just for Fletcher Associates, but potentially for their entire building." The irony was so complete, it felt like the universe was playing an elaborate joke. Fletcher Associates wanted to hire me as a consultant for improvements to my own building, negotiated through my husband who had no idea he was married to their landlord. "The entire building?" I managed. "That's what Richard Fletcher said. Apparently, your proposal demonstrated such a thorough understanding of the property's systems and potential that they think you could consult on building-wide efficiency improvements." Marcus opened his folder, spreading documents across my desk. "Emma, this could change everything for you." I stared at the papers, lease agreements, building schematics, tenant satisfaction surveys, all information I had intimate knowledge of as the property owner. Fletcher Associates was essentially asking me to consult on my own investment portfolio. They want me to meet with building management too? I asked, thinking of James Rodriguez and the complex performance this would require, already arranged. The building management company, Turner Holdings, has agreed to coordinate with any consultant we bring in. Marcus's excitement was infectious and heartbreaking. Emma, you could be looking at a 6-figure consulting contract. Real money, real professional recognition, real money. I almost laughed at the absurdity. The quarterly report still glowing on my computer screen showed that Turner Holdings had generated more profit in the past 3 months than Marcus would earn in 2 years. But in his mind, this consulting opportunity represented my big break, my chance to finally amount to something. What if I said no? I asked quietly. Marcus's face fell. No, Emma, this is the opportunity you've been waiting for your entire career. Why would you say no? Because I already own the building. Because Turner Holdings is my company. Because this entire situation has spiraled so far beyond my original protective fiction that I don't know how to extract myself without destroying everything we've built together. I'm just nervous, I said instead. It's a big step. Of course you're nervous. But Emma, I believe in you. I've always believed in you, even when you couldn't see your own potential. Marcus reached across the desk, taking my hands in his. This is your moment to shine. The tenderness in his voice nearly broke my resolve. Marcus genuinely loved me and wanted me to succeed, but his support was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of who I was. He was proud of me for potentially earning in a year what I actually earned in a month. Tell me about the meeting, I said, surrendering to the inevitable. 2 o'clock, Fletcher Associates conference room. Richard Fletcher, 2 other partners, and someone from Turner Holdings. Marcus squeezed my hands. Just be yourself, Emma. Show them the intelligence and competence I see every day. Be myself. The instruction was both simple and impossible. Which self? The cleaning company coordinator who lived within Marcus's assumptions? The property owner who controlled their professional environment? The woman caught between 2 identities who was running out of ways to reconcile them? I spent the morning in a state of controlled panic, reviewing files and preparing for what might be the most complex performance of my life. Linda called twice to coordinate logistics, her voice carefully professional as we discussed how to handle the meeting between Emma Morrison, consultant, and Turner Holdings, property management company. James Rodriguez will introduce you to the fictional Turner Holdings representative, Linda explained. We've arranged for David Kim from our legal team to play that role. He knows the situation and will handle the property management side of the discussion. Another layer of deception, another actor in the elaborate play I'd written to protect Marcus's ego. David Kim would pretend to represent Turner Holdings while I pretended to be discovering my own property for the first time. This is getting out of hand, I said, staring at myself in the bathroom mirror as I prepared for the meeting, but it was too late for second thoughts. Marcus had already left for work, texting me encouraging messages and reminders to be confident. Fletcher Associates was expecting their promising consultant. Turner Holdings had arrangements in place to maintain the fiction. I dressed carefully in a navy suit that split the difference between my 2 professional identities, neither too expensive nor too modest. The woman in the mirror looked competent and approachable, someone a law firm might trust with significant consulting responsibilities. The drive to Manhattan felt like a journey toward an inevitable reckoning. Every mile brought me closer to the moment when my carefully constructed dual identity would be tested in ways I'd never imagined. Park Avenue looked different as I approached it that afternoon. This wasn't my building or Marcus's workplace, but a neutral territory where Emma Morrison, consultant, would meet with potential clients to discuss improvements to property owned by Turner Holdings. James Rodriguez met me in the lobby, his professional demeanor giving no hint of our previous interactions. "Ms. Morrison," he greeted me formally. "Ready for the meeting?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied honestly. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor was silent, both of us processing the complexity of what was about to unfold. When the doors opened, Marcus was waiting with barely contained excitement. "Emma," he said, kissing my cheek. "Perfect timing." He led me through the Fletcher Associates reception area toward the conference room where my fate would be decided. Through the glass walls, I could see 3 men in expensive suits reviewing documents around a polished table. Richard Fletcher himself, whose lease renewal I'd approved 6 months earlier. "Gentlemen," Marcus announced as we entered the room, "I'd like you to meet Emma Morrison." What followed was one of the most surreal hours of my life. I sat at a conference table in my own building, discussing improvements to my own property with tenants who paid rent to my company, while my husband proudly introduced me as his underachieving wife who was finally getting her big break. Richard Fletcher was every inch the senior law partner, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. His questions were incisive, his analysis sharp, and his assumptions about my background completely wrong. "Your proposal demonstrates remarkable insight into building systems and tenant needs," he said, reviewing my storage optimization plan. "Tell me about your background in facilities management." I launched into the carefully crafted story I'd refined over 12 years of marriage, describing my experience with commercial cleaning and gradual development of expertise in space optimization. Every word was technically true while completely missing the larger reality. "Impressive," Fletcher nodded. "And you developed this expertise through hands-on experience rather than formal training?" "That's right," I confirmed, thinking of the years I'd spent learning about property management through direct ownership rather than academic study. David Kim from Turner Holdings played his role perfectly, discussing building policies and improvement procedures with the professional competence of someone who actually worked for my company. The conversation flowed smoothly, each participant maintaining their assigned fiction while discussing very real business opportunities. "Turner Holdings has been pleased with Fletcher Associates' tenancy," David said, consulting notes he'd prepared in coordination with Linda. "We're always interested in improvements that benefit both individual tenants and overall building value." Marcus beamed with pride as the meeting progressed, clearly thrilled by how well I was handling myself in this professional environment. His faith in my abilities was touching and heartbreaking in equal measure. "The scope of work we're discussing could be significant," Fletcher continued. "Not just the storage optimization, but potentially building-wide efficiency improvements. Are you prepared for a project of that magnitude?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications I was still processing. Fletcher Associates wanted to hire me as a consultant to improve my own building, coordinated through building management that was actually my own company. "I believe I could handle it," I said carefully, though I'd want to ensure proper coordination with building management on any significant modifications. "Of course," David Kim agreed smoothly. "Turner Holdings values input from qualified consultants who understand both tenant needs and property management requirements." The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of follow-up discussions. Fletcher Associates was clearly impressed with my proposal and eager to move forward with a broader consulting arrangement. Turner Holdings had agreed to coordinate implementation. Marcus was practically glowing with pride and excitement. As we left the building, Marcus could barely contain his enthusiasm. "Emma, that was incredible. You commanded that room like you belonged there." Thank you, I said, though the praise felt hollow. I mean it. The way you discussed building systems, tenant relations, property management protocols, where did you learn all of that? The question I'd been dreading. Marcus had just witnessed me demonstrate expertise that far exceeded what he thought I possessed, and he was beginning to notice the discrepancy. You pick things up over the years, I said vaguely. But Marcus wasn't satisfied with that answer. As we walked toward the parking garage, his expression grew thoughtful. Emma, some of the things you said in there, you talked about property valuation, tenant retention strategies, building depreciation schedules. That's not typical facilities management knowledge. My heart began to race. After 12 years of carefully managing his assumptions, Marcus was finally starting to question the story I'd constructed. I've always been interested in the business side of things, I said, trying to maintain the fiction. But how do you know about building ownership structures? About property management company protocols? Marcus stopped walking, turning to face me in the middle of the parking garage. Emma, what exactly do you do at Sunshine Solutions? The moment had arrived. After 12 years of elaborate deception, my husband was finally asking the right questions. I could feel the careful edifice I'd built beginning to crumble, and I wasn't sure whether to be terrified or relieved. Marcus, I said quietly, there are some things about my work that I haven't explained very clearly. His expression shifted from curiosity to concern. What do you mean? I looked around the parking garage, this subterranean level of my own building where I was about to either destroy my marriage or save it. The weight of 12 years of deception pressed against my chest as I prepared to tell the truth. Sunshine Solutions isn't just a cleaning company, I began. It's more complicated than that. How complicated? I took a deep breath, thinking of the quarterly reports on my home computer. The building we'd just left? The life I'd constructed in shadow while letting Marcus believe he was the successful one. Marcus, I own this building. I own Turner Holdings. I own the company that manages Fletcher Associates lease. The words tumbled out in a rush. I've owned it for 3 years. I've been your landlord this entire time. Marcus stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. What are you talking about? The building we just left, where you work every day, where Fletcher Associates pays rent? I own it. Turner Holdings is my company. When you come to work, you're coming to my property. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the distant hum of traffic from the street level above. Marcus's face cycled through expressions of confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been betrayal. That's impossible, he said finally. Emma, you clean offices. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. You shop at Target. I drive a 10-year-old Honda because it's reliable and inconspicuous. I shop at Target because I don't need to prove anything to strangers. And yes, I started by cleaning offices, but I built something much bigger from that foundation. Marcus shook his head slowly. You're telling me that my wife, who I've been married to for 12 years, secretly owns commercial real estate. 17 properties across 3 boroughs, I confirmed quietly. Turner Holdings, Morrison Investments, 3 other shell companies. Marcus, I've been building this for 15 years. 15 years. His voice was flat, processing. Since before we met. Since before law school. Since before you thought you needed to protect me from financial insecurity. Marcus leaned against a concrete pillar, his face pale in the fluorescent lighting. The dinners with my colleagues. All those times they made jokes about your dead-end job. You just sat there. I sat there because I love you. Because I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me from what? The question I'd been avoiding for 12 years. Why had I constructed this elaborate deception? What had I been so afraid of? From feeling like you weren't successful enough, I admitted. From thinking you weren't providing for us. From wondering if I'd married you for security instead of love. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at the concrete floor of my parking garage. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable. Emma, do you have any idea what this means? That our entire marriage has been built on a lie? No, he said slowly. It means that the woman I fell in love with was even more remarkable than I knew, and I've been too blind and self-absorbed to see it. The response wasn't what I'd expected. I'd prepared for anger, betrayal, accusations of deception. I hadn't prepared for understanding. You're not angry? Marcus laughed, though it sounded more exhausted than amused. Oh, I'm furious. But not at you. I'm angry at myself for being so arrogant that my wife felt she needed to hide her success to protect my ego. We stood in silence for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what had just been revealed. 12 years of assumptions had been shattered in the space of a parking garage conversation. What happens now? Marcus asked finally. I don't know, I admitted. I've been so focused on maintaining the deception that I never planned for what came after. After honesty, you mean? After honesty. Marcus pushed himself away from the pillar, walking slowly toward where I stood. Emma, can I see it? Your real office, your actual work? I nodded, pulling out my phone to call Linda. Prepare the executive suite, I told her. It's time for my husband to meet the real me. 20 minutes later, Marcus was sitting in the Turner Holdings executive conference room on the 40th floor of 425 Park Avenue, staring at financial statements that showed his wife owned assets worth more than he'd earned in several lifetimes. This is incredible, he said, reviewing quarterly profit reports. Emma, you're not just successful, you're brilliant. I had good teachers, I replied, thinking of my grandmother and her advice about controlling real estate. All those years I thought I was helping you aim higher. You were already operating at a level I couldn't even comprehend. Marcus set down the financial reports, looking directly at me. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to be smaller than you were. I made that choice, I reminded him. I could have told you the truth at any point. Could you have? Really? Marcus's expression was thoughtful. Or did I create an environment where your success felt threatening to my sense of identity? The question struck deeper than I'd expected. Marcus was right. I'd hidden my achievements not just to protect him, but because I'd sensed that he needed to be the successful one in our relationship. Maybe we both made mistakes, I suggested. Maybe. But Emma, I need you to know something. Marcus reached across the conference table, taking my hand. I'm proud of you. Intimidated as hell, but proud. And I want to learn how to be married to the woman you actually are, not the fiction we've been maintaining. The conversation that followed lasted until well past midnight. We talked about money and ambition, about identity and marriage, about the ways we'd both contributed to a dynamic that required deception to function. We discussed practical considerations too, how to integrate our finances, how to handle social situations, how to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty instead of protection. There's one more thing, I said as we prepared to leave the office. The Fletcher Associates consulting contract. Marcus groaned. Right, they want to hire you to improve your own building, which means I'd be essentially paying myself to make improvements that benefit my own property while generating consulting income from my own tenants. The complexity is making my head hurt, Marcus admitted. How do we handle it? Honestly, for once, I'll meet with Fletcher Associates as myself. Emma Morrison, owner of Turner Holdings. I'll explain that I have significant experience with the property and can provide consulting services at a reduced rate given my existing relationship with the building. Won't they figure out that you're the owner? Eventually, yes. But I'm tired of hiding, Marcus. I'm tired of being smaller than I am. The drive home was quiet, both of us processing the seismic shift in our understanding of each other and our marriage. When we pulled into the driveway of our house, a house I'd purchased but let Marcus believe we'd bought together, I felt lighter than I had in years. "Emma," Marcus said as we sat in the darkened car, "I love you. The real you. All of you. Even the part that secretly owns your office building? Especially the part that secretly owns my office building." 3 months later, Fletcher Associates signed a comprehensive consulting contract with Turner Holdings, represented by Emma Morrison Turner, principal owner and CEO. The local business journal ran a profile about the successful entrepreneur who'd built a real estate empire while maintaining a deliberately low profile. Marcus was quoted in the article, describing his wife as the smartest person I know and the most generous. "She made me successful by letting me think I was successful." The dinner parties at our house took on a different character. Instead of listening to condescending comments about my dead-end job, guests now ask thoughtful questions about commercial real estate and property management. Marcus introduced me not as his supportive wife, but as his brilliant partner. The change wasn't easy. 12 years of established patterns don't disappear overnight, and both of us had to learn new ways of relating to each other. But honesty, it turned out, was a much stronger foundation for marriage than protection had ever been. Sometimes, late at night, Marcus would shake his head in amazement. "I can't believe I spent all those years working in your building." "Our building," I'd correct him. "Everything I built for us." And that finally was the complete truth. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.